Well, initially, and obviously to give you all the background of Tet and all of that, I think you probably already got a lot of that, but as you know, 85,000 NVA infiltrated into South Vietnam in late January of 1968, occupied all the major provincial capitals, Saigon and Hue. Everywhere except Hue, they were able to be ousted within a matter of just days. In Hue, they were pretty well ensconced, and there was a lack of intelligence that we had as to exactly what was the strength in Hue. Initially, it was believed that it was just a platoon of NVA up there, and one company was sent up to move them out. And of course, they were practically decimated. So we begin, as we've been piecemealed in, unfortunately, we found out there were a lot more in there. And I've never really heard an accurate figure. I've heard anywhere from 10,000 to 15,000 that were NVA hardcore troops, plus the Viet Cong infrastructure that, of course, came out of the underground and was supporting them to a very, very high degree. And of course, Hue was a cultural and educational center of Vietnam, as well as having some hospitals. So it was a beautiful city. I never saw it before I got there, and it was pretty much a wreck when I finally got there. But it was a very difficult situation. But there were about anywhere from 10 to 15,000 NVA that were in there. And initially, the ARVN had said, we do not want American forces into the Hue Citadel itself, the imperial capital area, and we will try to recover that ourselves. And in the meantime, we had two understrength battalions, 2-5 and 1-1, that were fighting on the southern side of the city to secure it. And they were very successful. After about 10 or 11 days, they were able to secure that. But the fight inside the Citadel continued, and the ARVN forces fought valiantly, but they basically ran out of steam and ran out of troops with casualties. So they asked for Marine support, and 1st Battalion, 5th Marines was ordered to go into the Citadel to finish the battle over there. Initially, when we went in, 3 companies, Alpha, Bravo, and Charlie, went into the Citadel, and Delta Company, my company, was, for whatever the reason, we were assigned to 2-5 to help them finish policing up and mopping up in the southern side of the river. This was extreme. Again, this was another one of those very beneficial things for me, Martin, because it gave me the opportunity to talk to then Captain Christmas, Captain Downs, and Captain Meadows, who had been fighting for almost 2 weeks on the southern side, and they had learned an awful lot of lessons that would stand me in good stead when I went over the Citadel. So it was a, what I like to call, I got a Urban Warfare 101 in my 2 days that I spent with them. In the meantime, 1-5 got pretty much shot up the first day because they were moving into position where they thought ARVN were located, and the ARVN had moved out unknown to the battalion, and the NVA had moved in. So they were hit pretty heavily. So at that point, they called for me to come over, and I came over the next day to rejoin the battalion. And the sticking point there was a tower that was overlooking the battalion zone and our avenue of advance. And until this tower was taken, which was the high ground, then the NVA had the enfilade fire where they could fire down on the battalion and they could obstruct the movement. So it was critical that the tower be taken. And I think Charlie Company had tried to take it and Bravo Company had tried to take it, and they had not been successful. So when I reported over, one of the first things is one of the company commanders came up to me and told me about this very challenging situation. And he said, tomorrow you're going to have to go up and take that tower. And that night when we went to the CP meeting with the then Major Thompson, He explained everything that was going, and I got brought up to date with what was happening in the Citadel area. And he looked at me and he said, tomorrow Delta Company will take the tower. He didn't say, we'll try to take it, or I want you to go and see if you can, what you can do. He said, you'll take the tower tomorrow. And I said, aye, aye, sir. Now this was one of these things, Martin, that was very frustrating because of the enemy situation, the intensity of the fire. I was not able to make a reconnaissance, so I had no idea what I was up against. I had no idea of approaches that we could take. I had no idea what the enemy strength was, other than we knew there were a bunch of them up there. And the only good news that I got that night was that they were going to put artillery and naval gunfire into the position. And they throughout the night they did that. However, as you can imagine, with the flat trajectory of the naval gunfire, most of that just went right over them. But the artillery, I think, was fairly effective. But the next morning, when we moved out, it was not real cold, but it was a damp cold, which kind of chilled you because we were not accustomed to the cold. And I don't think it was raining, but we moved out in kind of a misty area, and fortunately we were able to move up right up to the line of departure at the base of this tower, undisclosed. So I'm thinking, this is going to be a piece of cake. The artillery's taking care of it, and we don't have anything to worry about. And in showing the greenness of my experience, I walked out in the middle of the street there, which was right next to the tower, and within about 2 seconds, the whole world erupted at myself and radio operator and this other bodyguard that was with me. And one of them was wounded, but we were able to get back into the cover of a building, and that's what basically started the attack on the tower. And that was on the 15th of February, 1968, and it took us most of the day until about 4 o'clock that afternoon of maneuvering through the rubble, up on the wall, to get to where we could mount an assault of the tower. And I had some magnificent Marines who did that. A sergeant by the name of Whitmer was a key person. A staff sergeant by the name of Toms was another key person that they helped lead the charge up on the tower, and we secured it. And this was about 16:30 or so in the evening of the 15th. And of course we did all the right things at that time, getting the casualties, evacuating, getting resupply up for ammunition and everything, and preparing for a counterattack. And the counterattack never came until 0400 the next morning, when all of a sudden the folks I had up on the tower were blasted off, and the NVA regained the top of the tower, and we had to mount a counterattack ourselves to go back and take the tower, which we did about first light on the morning of the 16th. And the attack itself and everything, I had about 100 Marines, and we had about 40% casualties that first day. Not all, I think I had about 6 killed and about 35 or so that were wounded. But some of them weren't evacuated, however. Inside the Citadel, it was the Imperial Palace was off limits to us. Even though the NVA had mortar positions over there and were mortaring us from there, we could not return fire. But the terrain was what I'll call a modest urban buildup of small shops and stores, but the streets were pretty narrow. It was a heavily residential area. It was heavily vegetated. It had lots of little cross streets, and it created a tactical scenario that you could only really attack in one direction, and that was a frontal attack. Each home the NVA had made into a mutually supporting fortified position. So once we would take one position, we would come under fire from more than 1 or 2 more. So it was a very difficult challenge. in doing that. It was not something where you could really maneuver very easily. Basically, it was a frontal attack. And this is where I used my supporting arms to the maximum effectiveness. I was calling in artillery danger close, within 50 meters of us. I was using my mortars. I think we used something like 3,000 or 4,000 rounds of mortar ammunition during the battle in there. And again, all this was one, to get them and to protect us, and it worked. But it was a very dense area. It was not spread out. You really didn't see the enemy until you were right on them, and basically it was they would be within 50 feet of you, and you were in a face-to-face confrontation with them. We didn't have any concern that we were being lured into a killing zone. The whole city was a killing zone, so we knew we were already in a killing zone. So we just had to be very careful with our movement, Martin, take advantage of the cover and concealment, and we had lots of it, but the bombed out buildings and the rubble allowed us to have some protection. Of course, it offered the same degree of protection to the NVA as well. And they had the opportunity. They had been in there now for a couple of weeks, so they had fortified a number of the positions, and they knew the terrain. We didn't know the terrain. So we had difficulty, there, because we didn't know if we turned left here what we were going to find if we turned right. The NVA knew, but we really basically, as I said earlier, only had one direction, and that was forward. One of the key elements of being able to take the tower on the day of the 15th was a tank which was commanded by Lieutenant Morrison, who was the tank platoon commander, and he was able to maneuver up right beside me, and I was in a bombed out store, a house, and it had an exit to the street. And he was able to come up right beside me, right at the base of the tower. And initially I thought, well, I'll go out and use the tank, infantry to tank telephone that was on the back of the tank. But the intensity of the fire was so heavy. I mean, the rounds were bouncing off everywhere. I thought better of going out and standing behind the tank. So I got on the PRC-25 and got on his net, and was able to direct his fire from there. But he was a marvelous guy. He would pop out of his turret, man his 50, and spray down the tower and use his gun up there. So we blasted it pretty much to rubble, thanks to the tank. I mean, we were very blessed to have that kind of support. Casualties were pretty significant in Hue City, Martin. When I took over the company in the end of January, I had what we would call about 169 Marines, foxhole strength, that I could take out in the field. By the time we got, and that was, late January. Now, we also had a number of combat activity from the end of when TET started on the 30th of January up through the 10th when we got ready to move into to Hue. We were under basically constant contact with the NVA in the Fubai area, and of course we were taking casualties. When I got into Hue and we had participated with 2-5, and then I was ordered to go back over to 1-5. Regiment, in their wisdom, took a platoon. They said, we need to have one of your platoons to be road guard security for the convoys, which was ludicrous. Here I was getting ready to go into a heavy combat, and they were taking people away from me. Well, to make a long story short, I negotiated with them and gave them 20. So I ended up going into Hue City with about 100 Marines. And the interesting thing there is that on that first minute when we started the firefight to take the tower, my second platoon, the lieutenant was up on a piazza looking over the street, dumb like me, and he got hit by an RPG. Took him out, took the radio out, and I lost contact with that platoon. So in essence, I was now just had my weapons section and one platoon to maneuver against the tower which we did for most of the day until we were able to get that other platoon tied back in with us. But at the end of the battle, on something like March 2nd, 3rd, 4th, somewhere along in there, I was down to 39 Marines, and that was standing. So I didn't even have a platoon, but they were all veterans and they had done magnificent, and it was due to their courage, their sacrifice, their commitment. They truly epitomized the legacy of those Marines that went before them in doing their duty.